Welcome to the Rankings Podcast, where we feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and elite personal injury attorneys and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Chris Stryer here, president and founder of Rankings.io, where we help elite personal injury attorneys dominate first-page rankings. You're listening to the Rankings Podcast, where I feature innovative business owners and, of course, elite personal injury attorneys. I'm excited because I have Stewart Guss on the show today. Stewart is the founder of Stewart J, Guss Attorney at Law, a national personal injury law firm based in Houston with multiple offices around the country. Stewart started as a solo practitioner and now has over 100 employees in 7 offices in 3 different states. Stewart has been recognized by the National Association of Distinguished Counsel as one of the top 1% of personal injury attorneys in the country, by the National Trial Lawyers as one of the top 100 trial lawyers in the nation, and as one of the best attorneys in America by the prestigious Rue Ratings. Stewart, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for such a gracious introduction. Even my dogs are proud of me now.
Stuart, we're really excited to have you. So let's start things off. So how did you get started with the firm? Where did the idea come from?
Well, so actually, let me start with this. The pink elephant in the room. You may have noticed that I have pink hair. I am actually a real lawyer and not a closet punk rocker. Long story short, I lost a bet, but suffice it to say that a significant amount of money was raised for charity. This is not my normal look, and I certainly wouldn't go to court like this unless maybe it was in San Francisco or Portland or somewhere like that. Starting off, well, when I first started practicing law, I went to work for a small litigation boutique firm. Had a good time there. I did a lot of personal injury. I also did some appellate work and business litigation. And then in 1999, I decided to hang out my own shingle. I knew that I wanted to focus on personal injury law, but at the time, I understand that the folks listening to this podcast probably range anywhere from solo practitioners to folks with hundreds of employees. But most of you will probably relate. I'd go to cocktail parties. People would ask, "What do you do?" "I'm a lawyer." "Well, what kind of law do you do?" They'd ask me. I'd say, "Well, what kind of law do you need?" And they'd tell me, and I'd be like, "Oh, yeah, that's what I do. That's what I do." Well, suffice it to say, I was lucky and successful enough in building up a client base so that, within about a year of my opening shop, I was able to focus on personal injury, and the rest, as they say, is history.
That's great. So what were those early days like for your firm?
Well, so the way I like to explain it is I worked in a 12 by 12 office in an executive suite, and I get to work in the morning. I'd make the coffee, and if a fax had to be sent, by the way, for those of you in the generation behind mine, a fax is where you put a piece of paper in a machine and it no, I'm just kidding. Faxes need to be sent. I sent the fax. A brief need to be written. I wrote it. Needed to be typed. Needed to be filed. I was my own messenger. And then, of course, at the end of the day, I cleaned the coffee pot and I went home. I actually didn't hire my first employee until about 2 years after I hung out my own shingle. And I'll tell you, one of the funny things about that is when I hired my first employee, I literally thought to myself, now remember, I've got about 120 staff members. I literally thought to myself, what am I going to have this person do? How can I occupy their time for 40 hours a week?
So you're wearing about 100 hats, if not 1,000 hats.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm by nature such a control freak. I didn't want to give any of those hats up. So obviously I figured out that part.
Obviously you did. So what was the big turning point in your firm? Like what changed it? What took it to the next level?
So, okay. So just to clarify, you did not pay me to say this. this comes from my heart and my experience. Advertising, marketing, and not just advertising and marketing, but smart advertising and marketing, and being able to reach the audience that needs you when they need you. Well, I'll tell you what, if you have, I know that you focus obviously on helping your clients with digital marketing. If I could, let me tell a quick story about how I look at the concept of digital marketing. Digital marketing is like guerrilla marketing. You spend every penny wisely and with forethought and with intention. The differentiator, we still have a lot of I still have a lot of brothers and sisters at the plaintiff's bar that are advertising with billboards and television and old school. And look, if you've got that footprint and that name recognition, that there's nothing wrong with doing that. But the way that I looked at advertising, and specifically digital advertising, Chris, I know you're younger than I am, but do you remember a show from the 70s, WKRP in Cincinnati?
I don't, Stewart. You'll have to explain it.
Okay, so folks my age will probably remember it, but there's a great scene where it was a silly comedy show. It's a great scene where, as a promotion, the radio station took like 100 turkeys for Thanksgiving, put them up in a helicopter, flew them over Cincinnati, and then let them go. And of course, when they all plummeted to the ground and splattered all over the place,
Jeez.
That's when someone realized turkeys don't fly. So, and it was the news commentator. It took from the old Hindenburg clip. Oh, the humanity. Anyway, my view about advertising is, if you do billboards and television, what you're doing is you're taking a helicopter and you're flying it to 10,000 feet above your market area. You're dropping out 100,000 leaflets, right? And you're hoping that 10 or 20 of them will land in windshields that are cracked or bumpers that are broken because they were just in a car accident. But 99% of those leaflets that are dropped will not hit your target audience when you need them. But if you focus on digital marketing, you're able to reach essentially a really large number of people who need you, but they only see you when they need you. So when you go with digital marketing, whether it's SEO or pay-per-click or Facebook advertising, people aren't going to know who you are until they need a personal injury lawyer. And then if you're doing things right, you're the only face they're going to see.
So let me jump in here, Stewart. So basically what you're talking about is you're highly focused and highly sensitive to direct marketing with consumers that have intent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And from my perspective, keep in mind, I'm not trying to brag, and I give, 99% of the credit to my teammates and the people I work with and have picked up along the way. But think about the fact that 20 years ago, I was cleaning my coffee pot at the end of the day, sitting alone in my 12 by 12 office. And now today, I've got 120 people in 7 offices in 3 different states. And I was able to do that. My marketing budget is pretty big, but it's also really focused on digital. So ultimately, from my perspective, while I might not be getting a lot of branding out of it, I get an awful lot of traffic and leads.
Absolutely. So let's talk about, I like to focus on direct marketing of digital just in general, of course. Let's talk about, when you started acquiring a lot of clients and there was mistakes that happened or things that you learned from. What were some of those early mistakes that you learned from?
Well, so the funny thing is, like I said, there are a lot, I'm at the plaintiff's bar nationwide with some really intelligent men and women who are excellent advocates for their clients. The one thing that I've learned is almost a universal constant in our business. the lawyers that I have great respect for as litigators, as marketers, as businessmen and women, the one thing that we are generally really awful at is handling personnel issues. And that was really true for me. Honestly, going to trial, practicing law, doing the research, filing a brief, is actually really easy relative to the much more difficult task of managing people. That is absolutely the biggest lesson that I've learned. And specifically, I'll just disclose my two weaknesses, and I'm still working on them, were number one, a tendency to after I learned to delegate and I figured out what that first employee would do, I would tend to over delegate, not circle back and make sure that, execution was right on spot. And the other, and that's a lesson that I've learned. You have to reach, I went from not delegating at all to just delegating and trusting that it would be okay. And you have to reach that happy medium. The other big lesson that I learned is, and this is one that I struggle with. For a lawyer, I'm a pretty nice guy. I'll say so myself. I generally don't like conflict. I don't like arguing with people. Ironic, I know. But when I have to give pointed feedback or directed correction to my attorneys or my management, I always struggled with that because I never like to hurt people's feelings. And one of the biggest breakthroughs that I've come to as a manager was realizing that giving that feedback is not just about my interaction with that attorney or that manager. It's about my obligation and responsibility to the entity as a whole and to the other 119 employees that are depending on, my entity being a success in order to be able to put bread on the table and a roof over their head. Once I came to that realization, almost like a village chief, I've got to be responsible for the whole village. It became much easier for me to say what I need to say when I need to say it to employees that need a little bit of feedback.
Yeah, because now it's not just one person. It's now many people depend upon you. So those candid conversations, I'm sure, just came easier because of that.
Well, I'll be honest with you. It's not that they come easier. I still don't like having to give people pointed feedback or directed, criticism. But I'm much more comfortable. Well, I'm not comfortable doing it, but I'm better at actually doing it, even though I don't want to, if that makes sense.
For sure.
It does not come naturally from me to criticize people, but now that I see my responsibility to my other, village members, it's much easier for me to do what I need to do, even if I don't like doing it.
That makes total sense. I agree with you. So let's transition to the next question. I work with a lot of personal injury firms, and I see and hear about all different styles of managing their intake department, just handling intakes in general. And I've got to say that your intake department is a well-oiled machine. What tips or advice can you give our audience to take their intake department to the next level? What should they be looking at in regards to intake?
Well, so first, I can only claim a very, very tiny proportion of my success. 99% of my success is based on the people that I've hired and trained and trusted to execute. So with that, I need to give a shout out to Sean Schmidt, who is my executive member of my board. He's over the intake department. And then Tiffany Little, who's the manager. The biggest turnaround that I got from my intake department, when I was originally starting to grow and doing intakes, I would have my case managers and other, and attorneys and other legal staff doing intakes. Intake would come in, they transfer it back to a case manager or an attorney to do the intake. And, it worked okay. But after a while, a little light bulb went off in my head. I'm asking people to do intake. I'm asking people who are already busy to take time out of their day to complete an intake to make them even busier. So from a business perspective and from a management perspective, I came to the realization that the smartest way to handle intake is to have a completely separate intake department, trained and supervised by attorneys with plenty of escape valves in terms of looping in attorneys to assist with the process. But having a separate dedicated intake team that handled the nuts and bolts of intake sort of avoided what may be an unconscious conflict of interest in terms of the process. And in terms of my intake, again, Sean and Tiffany get all the credit for its success. But I will say one of the key things that I'm really proud of is that we don't necessarily hire legal staff and teach them how to do intake. We hire from a very diverse pool of individuals with different life stories and different life experiences, because we want our intake staff to mirror our client base as much as possible. The intake staff is not there to give legal advice or make a decision about a case. They're there to gather information and help the process along. But ultimately, if you think about it, hiring in my case, a relatively young, diverse staff that mirrors my potential, client base, it makes my prospective clients infinitely more comfortable talking to someone who's just like them and talking about, their car wreck and their injuries and the effect on their life. That's my one big piece of advice in terms of people who are getting ready to set up their own intake department.
There are tons of takeaways there. So, when you have these individuals focusing on one priority, one set of skills, you lead to expertise, and then you can have your attorneys focusing on, becoming experts at practicing the law.
And honestly, my two passions today are intake and marketing. I could literally do an entire podcast, a whole series of podcasts on either one of those topics, but yeah.
Absolutely. There's just tons of nuggets in there. So now with over 100 employees, you got the intake system working, you got your marketing working, direct marketing. It becomes more of an HR situation where you're having to constantly hire and find the best talent. So what are some lessons in regards to the HR side?
Yeah. So that's really, from my perspective, managing people is truly my biggest challenge as an attorney and as the owner of a decent sized enterprise. But really the trick, it all begins with hiring the right people. And what I found is that when you're looking at resumes and you're interviewing folks, trust your gut, but not 100%. My biggest mistake when I was, I've got a whole personnel department now that handles, the vast majority of our hiring. But when I was still, highly involved in hiring all of my staff, I'd get a good feeling for a person, or I'd like them personally, and I would be inclined to want to offer them a job. And what I realized is that, early on, what I realized is you don't want an office full of friends. You want an office full of highly skilled and talented professionals. And just like with the intake department, I think diversity is very important in the intake department. I feel the exact same way about every other position where we staff at my firm. Different people with different backgrounds, different ideas about life, different philosophies. I think that just like the United States, our strength is our diversity. I feel in a microcosm way, the exact same way about staffing at my firm. So I may not personally, don't take offense if my employees are watching this. I'm not talking about you. So I might not personally be inclined to be friends with every particular employee that I hire. But for the most part, we're hiring the right people for the right position to do the right thing by our clients. And that did not come naturally.
That's great.
I swear I'm not talking about you, whoever you are. You I like. It's the other person.
No, that's awesome. So your firm's it's growing, it's expanding rapidly. You're opening new offices, you're constantly exploring new opportunities, and marketing is an extreme focus. So how are you positioning for your firm for growth now?
Yeah. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is we're trying to explore untapped opportunities. And the way that I look at it is, from a cynical perspective, you could look at it from the perspective of, opportunities for profit, opportunities to make money. And as corny as it sounds, what I look for are untapped opportunities to do good in the world. So, my operating philosophy has always been, don't focus on making money, focus on being a good lawyer, doing good in the world. And I think I'm proof of this, the money, the client base, the success will follow. So, we are constantly on the lookout for, different areas or opportunities where we think just basically people are being treated unfairly or taken advantage of. And we look to, we look into these areas and decide, is this something that we want to get into, whether it's a particular type of automobile tort, or, for example, there is unfortunately just a massive amount of negligence going on at a lot of nursing homes around the country. So that's one of the areas that we're looking at getting into more. Again, and it's not, it's our business, and we hope we make a profit doing it. But the idea being, if we come in and we aggressively pursue, for example, nursing home cases, then we can be a part of the solution that makes nursing homes safer and better for, everyone else.
And there's not a lot of careers that can do that, if we're being honest. You can have a direct impact on many people's lives.
Well, okay. And I'll take us off track for 1 second and give a shout out here to my sister, Liz Nebeker. When it comes to making impacts on lives, I give her way more props than I would ever give myself. She's the head librarian at Jersey Village High School here in Houston. And if you want to talk about a career that can really make an impact, a positive impact on a lot of people, she's got that, she's got that to the nth degree. But yeah, I mean, our goal is to try and make a positive impact, both on the lives of our clients and their families, but to the extent that we can, society as a whole. This is why we're also involved in mass torts regarding, bad drugs or bad medical devices. Unfortunately, the regulatory scheme, the FDA has essentially been crumbling in size and scope for decades. So to a certain extent, us personal injury lawyers, we're the front line. We're the watchers on the wall, as it were, between greedy, profit-driven drug makers and device makers and the safety of the public.
Well, I love those philosophies. I love just your mindset on this, and how you do your job and grow your company in general.
Well, Chris, I'm a big believer in karma, right? So my whole philosophy about life and about business is to put good out in the world. Cast the bread out on the water. Don't expect anything in return for it. Just do as much good as you can every day. And ultimately, karma will bring the benefit back to you sometimes. If it does, great. If it doesn't, take joy in the fact that you've been able to do good in the world.
That's an excellent way to look at it. And then you get that reciprocity even when you weren't expecting it.
Exactly.
Getting to this next level, you've had to continuously improve. You've had to look for areas, that you can draw from knowledge. Are there any business books or mentors that come to mind that have helped you develop?
Yeah, I'm gonna recommend one book in particular, and this is more. I think this would be a recommendation more towards maybe my friends and colleagues who are starting to grow an organization and have several people that they're trying to manage. The best book about management and leadership I have ever read in my life is a book called Call Sign Chaos by General Jim Mattis. And it talks about his rise through the ranks, and the lessons that he learned, oftentimes the hard way, about how to manage and lead and motivate people. He's a very successful general, super smart guy. And, when I make decisions, my decisions are very important. They affect the cases of our clients. When he makes decisions, his decisions affect the life or death of his soldiers that report to him. So in some ways, he's under a lot more pressure. Not that I don't take my cases or my clients seriously. His decisions are literally life and death. And he's really learned, I think, he's really mastered the ability to get that balance between over-delegation and under-delegation, supervision versus knowing when to, just let your people run. I highly recommend the book.
I'm going to have to add that one to my list for sure. Also at your organization, it's important to have the right tools. So is there some top software that you can recommend to our audience on growing their firms? Growing and managing.
So I will not say anything about our current case management software because it's pretty good and it's got us to where we're going. I'll give a shout out. We are in the process of transitioning over to GrowPath, which is a product based out of North Carolina. It's a very successful law firm there, developed this internally. They've decided to roll it out and set it up as a separate business division. It's smart, it's agile, it's powerful. It has good AI built into it, flexibility. So I can't give a full-throated endorsement because I'm not live on it yet. But I've spent a lot of time behind the wheel and doing research. So if you have a law firm with more than about 10 or 20 folks, and you're frustrated with your current case management software, get in touch with folks at GrowPath.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll link up GrowPath in the show notes, and everyone listening will have access to them. Let's do a couple more questions here, Stewart. Now that you're in this position, your position's changed, right? You've removed many of those hats, and now you have some activities that just bring tremendous value to your organization. So at this stage in your business, what are your high value activities? What are those actions that bring the most impact to your firm now?
Yeah, and that's a really great question. And I think I've got a pretty good answer for you. I've got a team of lawyers and executives working for me. I've got managers, supervisors, and depending on what level in the organization they are, they're either worried about what they're doing this minute, this hour, or what the game plan is for this month or this quarter. Okay, and they're great at executing that. I sort of see myself not just as a leader and a motivator, but in a certain perspective, sort of the chief visionary. So I let the rest of my leadership and management worry about operations on a day-to-day, week-to-week, and month-to-month basis. And they're really focused on what we're doing today and cash flow for next month. Whereas I spend a lot of time looking at where we're going to be in a year or 2 years or 5 years. So I trust my top people to look at the road right in front of us and make sure we stay between the lines as we move forward. And I am looking as far out on the horizon as I can. That's where I spend most of my time.
That's amazing because, many times if you're in the weeds doing the work, you can't have your head up. You just don't have the ability to have your head up and look and see the big picture of what's going on.
Well, having an executive structure and leaders like Sean and Tiffany and Brent Sessine, Jason Ruin and Scott Whitehouse, having such talented and capable leadership at the firm really allows me to step out of the weeds and focus on a long-term vision for where the practice is going.
That's amazing, and I'm sure we could have a whole segment on how you found those individuals, and that's something that I might maybe emailing you afterwards about. But
I'm happy to. And by the way, now that I'm giving props to everybody, I really ought to go back and clarify one answer to one question a little while ago, because I told you before, I don't like to hurt feelings. It's not that I don't like anyone at my law firm. The fact is, when we do our firm picnics and social events together, I actually like everybody. My only point was, and I'm very lucky in that regard, there's really no one in my firm, not a single person I dislike, but they're different from the people that I maybe would naturally gravitate to go grab a beer with. That was the point that I was trying to make, because I'm feeling, right, the Jewish mother in me is now feeling guilty that I'm going to have some staff member thinking, oh my God, is he talking about me? No, there's actually no one I don't like. No. I love all you guys.
Yeah, and I'm sure that if they really got under your skin, they probably wouldn't be your organization. So,
actually, it's funny you should say that. I think one of the key things that a manager or a leader has to learn is you have to have an open ear for respectful dissent. So I do have a couple of, I call them Eeyores in my upper management staff, and I sort of give them a hard time. If I come up with what I think is a great idea, and then they just rain on my parade, I'm like, oh man, seriously? But at the end of the day, when you create an atmosphere that allows for respectful dissent, just because I'm smart doesn't mean I'm always the smartest guy in the room. And if someone's got a better idea or sees a hole in an idea that I have, I have to let go of my ego and understand that sometimes my ideas are not the best.
And that's how you get those unique perspectives. That's how, it's you don't want the yes people. You want people that can drive new ideas and new innovations and help with that growth.
Absolutely.
So let's do one final question here. Do you have any advice for your fellow lawyers trying to grow a successful practice?
I do, actually. I do interviews and podcasts and whatnot. I'm happy to, my philosophy about life and about business is, we're all in this together, and a rising tide lifts all boats. So whether you're a fellow personal injury lawyer or another practice area or completely different business, I'm always happy to share whatever limited wisdom I have. The two nuggets of advice that I always will give when I'm asked that question. Number one, recognize the fact that you are the best investment that you can make. So when you're running your business, every time you make $1 of profit, put a dime in your pocket and take the other 90 cents and put it back into your business. And that is literally how I went from, me cleaning the coffee pot at the end of the day, because I was the only person, to the size and scope of the firm I've got today. I've trusted in myself and knew that I was my best investment. My firm was. And when I got big enough, I realized that it's not me I'm investing in. It's those 120 people, all of whom I like. That's where I'm investing that 90 cents of every dollar. That's my first bit of advice. My second bit of advice, and this is specific to the practice of law. Very simple. Get up in the morning, go to work. When you're faced with a decision that you have to make, do the right thing. The next time you're faced with a decision, do the right thing. Lather, rinse, repeat. And as long as you always do the right thing by your clients, by your employees, by your community, you are almost guaranteed to succeed.
Wow. That's super compelling. And I love that. Just do the right thing. And then it's got to limit your stress, and you don't have things that you keep you up at night.
That's the thing. Unfortunately, particularly in personal injury, we know that there are some players out there that unfortunately bend the rules a little bit, sometimes just break them. I've never done that. I never will. And the advantage of that is when I lay down at night and my head hits the pillow, I go to sleep. Nothing's keeping me awake at night.
That's great. That's great. Guys, we've been talking to Stewart Guss of Stewart J. Guss Attorney at Law. Stewart, where can people go to learn more about you? www.attorneyguss.com is my website. And if any of you guys would like some advice or tips or mentoring, you're always welcome to email me personally at Stewart, Stewart, at attorneyguss.com. My advice and my wisdom isn't always necessarily the best or right, but whatever it's worth, I'm happy to share it. Stewart, thanks so much.
Thank you, Chris. Have a great one.
Thanks for listening to the Rankings Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.